Okay, welcome back. We're still talking about preparation. So you really need to document all this stuff, okay? Document the plan. For example, let's say your plan has a call-out roster on who you're going to call Ghostbusters, who you're going to call for this problem or that problem, who the vendors are. Do you know the name of your electrical provider? What's their emergency phone number? Who is your internet service provider? What's their emergency phone number, right? List of this stuff. Now, let me just tell you, having a call-out roster with people's names and phone numbers, that's kind of sensitive, right? But resist the temptation to store this only in electronic format, because when the disaster happens and the server goes down, you can't go to the server and pull up the call-out roster, can you? So you need printed copies of this stuff. Do not store your documentation on the server. Well, let me rephrase that. Of course you can store it on the server, but don't have that as your only copy. You need paper copies. When I did this for a living, I had a copy of the entire disaster recovery plan at home. Okay? The security guards had one. I had one at home. There's some inside the building, But if the building burnt down, nobody's going to run inside the building and fetch that dang 3-ring binder, right? Okay, guys, you got to figure this out. Okay, so document everything, but have the documentation in printed. There's a really cool story on page 392 that talked about this call center, and they had a disaster, and they had like an earthquake, and the building was not safe for occupants, so they actually ran the cables through the windows and set up shop outside in the lawn. That pretty cool? All right. Data integrity. Page 392. Now, in the book, they kind of are loose with the term integrity, and I am not, so please pay attention to the distinction, because I don't really like the way the book describes it. So, integrity is about assuming the data has not been altered or deleted. In other words, here's the classic example that I like. Let's say the HR people are getting ready to send a note saying, I think Bob deserves a 10% raise, okay? And they send this little message. I intercept it and change the 10 to a 20. And so now Bob gets a 20% raise instead. Woohoo! Okay? Because I've altered it in transit, okay? I've altered the data. So we need some way to detect whether or not something has been altered, or we need to prevent it from altering. So it could be human errors by your own folks. That is a very, very common thing. It could be bugs in the software where, I put in 10 and it changed it to 20. It could be a hardware issue where, the network kind of burped a little bit and somehow some bits got flipped and so that 10 made it to a 20. Or it could be bad guys, okay? And yeah, that could happen. But typically we don't talk about bad guys from an integrity point of view necessarily. Normally when we talk about bad guys, we're talking about industrial espionage and theft of intellectual property, those kind of things. And so that most likely is a confidentiality issue, not integrity. Integrity is about, can I have some sort of assurance that when I compose this document, it has not changed since the last time I've seen it. That is data integrity, okay? Confidentiality is the bad guys can't see it. Okay, they are not the same concept. And in this paragraph, they kind of mix the two, and I don't particularly like that. So, yes, there are issues. Hey, no spy would ever, set off the fire alarm in the building, right? And when people are, during the chaos of people running around like maniacs trying to evacuate the building, they wouldn't go in and steal things, would they? No, that would never happen. Okay. So, redundant sites on page 393. So, we're talking about business continuity. If you go to your boss and say, I need a complete copy of the entire server room in some other building. So, let's say you have a campus. And again, if you go to this website, it'll tell you how far away should your stuff be. If you're in a tornado kind of a scenario, it could be pretty long distance. I mean, if you're not in a tornado area, maybe we're talking about, half a mile or something. I mean, a couple hundred feet. But, if it's you're in Tornado Alley, maybe half a mile or so is how far away. How far away is good enough? There's websites that can help you with this. So I need a second site to be able to set up. Now, it could be what's called a hot site, where all the hardware and software and power is already there, and all basically you have to do is just restore some backups and hit the button. Or it could be just an empty room with, you know, power and network connections. And so I have to haul my servers over and plug them in. That might take a lot longer. But again, it's business continuity. Ask the boss, how long can you be down? Can you be down for a week? And he's probably going to say, no, that'll really cut into our profit. Can you be down for a day? And you say, well, yeah, but I really like it less than that. So you say, how much is 6 days worth? You know, he might actually go clickety. Well, looks like if we lost 6 days worth of stuff, that's worth, you know, 3.2 million. So you're not going to complain if I ask for 320,000 to set up an alternate site over here, and they'll go, oh, well, I guess not. See how this game is played? It's money. Okay, disaster equals money. I don't know how many times I've said that. Okay, so convincing your boss you need a second site to plug things in is a way you can do this. A security disaster, page 394. So it could be that there was a break-in, but there's no physical evidence, right? I mean, there's no like smashed windows and jimmied locks, right? They came in through the internet. So there's no physical. By the way, let's say you're in Podunk, Louisiana somewhere, and you have a security break-in. So you call the local sheriff's office and said, I want to report a break-in. He's going to show up there with his little, you know, fingerprint kit. Okay, show me where they broke in. And you go, oh no, they broke in through the internet. He's going to say, what? Yeah, local police departments are just not prepared to handle these kinds of things. Just saying. Okay, let me get back. So the break-in could be, you know, bad guys, right? Or it could be your own people who accidentally put a customer list out on Facebook. It could happen. You know, with all their contact information, it's known to happen. There's a really cool example here they talked about in the book. You know, how you can get canned systems. You know, you can go to get a disk that contains like an operating system and a web page, you know, web server scenario, whole thing. So Equifax is a company that used Apache struts. If you don't know what that is, don't worry about it. That's not relevant to the conversation. So what happened is this one particular component of a web server became vulnerable. But because they bought this thing as well, they actually buy it, it's free. You download this disk and set up your web server, you're probably not all that aware of, oh, this component has a vulnerability. And so sure enough, there was this issue with Equifax and their Apache struts. And yeah, they had an unpatched piece of stuff from open source software that led to a huge data breach with Equifax. You know, Equifax is one of the companies that do your credit score thing, and so they have they basically have everything you would ever need in order to impersonate another person, right? Absolutely everything. They know your social security number, they know your address, they know all your bank accounts, they know everything, okay? So a break in those guys, wow. The point of this story was, you know, I'm Equifax, and I have no idea that, oh, by the way, this vulnerability showed up in some, I mean, okay, let's say you're the IT person, and you're casually reading, and it says, hey, man, Apache Struts has got a vulnerability. You're going, okay, whatever, dude, right? You weren't even aware that you were using that in your web page. See how this works? Okay, all right. So media relations on page 394. There are companies out there that do disaster media relations. That's what they do for a living. Like if there's a fire or flood or something, and wipe out a building, you actually hire these people, and they'll be your front man, so to speak, and they'll talk to the press, and they know exactly what to say. Here's an interesting question, a philosophical question that I don't have the answer to, and that is, how many data breaches are never reported? Oops, somebody put something out on Facebook by accident. Dang, I'm not going to say anything. I don't want to lose customers. I don't want to appear incompetent, so I'm not going to report this. I'm just going to sweep it under the rug. Ooh, okay. So And here's another thing. If you call the police in, like, for example, I don't know, it's kind of hard to say. Let's say the bomb went off, okay, in your building. And you call the police or the FBI and they come. They're going to take over the scene, okay? And, they're going to put red tape out, saying crime scene. So after they do that, and you say, oh, I need to get into the server room so I could, grab the backup so we can get back in business, they're going to say, whoa, 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 that's a crime scene. Wow. All right, think about this, okay? Which do you want to protect? You want to get your data back up and running so you can do business? Or do you want to preserve the crime scene? Yikes. Okay, this is not at all a very easy thing to solve. Okay, so not in the book. You absolutely, positively must do rehearsals for your disaster recovery business continuity plan. Absolutely, positively. Trust me, if you grab, let's talk about something just incredibly simple. Okay, you grab the call-out list, okay? Try it one day. Sit down and call those numbers and see. And it's like, oh, well, yeah, I swapped out phone providers and that's not my phone number anymore. I guarantee there'll be something that's missing. I absolutely guarantee it. Okay, here's another one. We have a junior employee that first came in, and we thought, well, hey, this would be a perfect opportunity to see if our documentation is good. So what we did, we had a slow period of time. We went and got an old server out of storage and plunked it down and said, okay, we're going to pretend like this is, our main server. And what I want you to do is do a complete restore on this server. And here's the book that explains how to do this. And then that's it. You just sit back and watch them do. All right. Now you will find some things. I'll give you one example. Not that particular scenario, but a scenario similar to it, where we wanted to do a disaster recovery drill, and the media that for like the Windows server and the license was locked up in the IT administrator's office, and it was like 10 o'clock at night and no one had the key. That's not smart, is it? Right? So yeah, what we did is we had a book that went with every server, and it had a copy of the disk and the activation keys and how we partitioned the disk, and here's all the software that was installed, a printout from that SOSOS thing that showed how everything was configured, where the shares were and what the permissions are and all that stuff, okay? And we stuck that all in the book and said, oh, and now back to the story. So the junior guy got the book, and we said, okay, here, install the OS, do a restore from the tape. And I'll give you another story. This is not exactly the same story, but it's similar. So there's a massive lightning strike, and it blew out a bunch of power. But we're back up on generator, so we're good. So I send the guy off to get the tapes. Now, we kept the tapes in a vault in another building. So I said, okay, we need Tuesday's tape. So he jumps in a truck and drives over to the other building. And he came back with a cardboard box of all of the tapes. And I went, why did you bring them all? And he goes, well, the power is out over there. I couldn't see. And I went, oh, okay. One of the things we need to do is include a flashlight in this whole scenario, right? Okay. All right. See how you really have to rehearse these things? Just telling you. All right. One more time. Backup and recovery. Nobody cares how long it takes to do a backup, because typically it's done in the middle of the night. And everyone cares how long it takes to do a restore, because you're losing money. Okay, that's an incredibly important thing. If you haven't figured that out yet, that is definitely going to be something we're going to be talking about on the quiz. So basically, how much money can you lose? And if you have a good CEO, he's going to realize, whoa, I need to invest in my disaster recovery / business continuity. Okay, we've reached the end of this chapter, and we'll see you guys again in the next chapter.